Minister, I want to ask you about the cost of living and what will be done about it. Obviously, energy prices are rocketing. We saw two energy companies, Budget Energy and SSE Electricity, announce cost increases of 29% and 9% respectively in September. Our sort of Lech Harlar or Drimmen Down Dealish that's going to save us, Equinor have pulled out of the Moneypoint project, which hopefully won't scuttle it, but will delay it, certainly. We're seeing, people are seeing increases in their shopping baskets already, and almost all of the big agri-food companies published warnings through late summer, September, and the costs increasing in that regard. Somebody who works in that sector that I would have quite a lot of regard for told me that he expected to see food inflation hit 40% by the end of next spring. You know, 40% increase in people's shopping basket is huge, on top of energy costs. And of course, the construction industry, we see the CSO announce that the cost of structural steel has gone up 26.7% this year. The cost of rough timber has gone up 60%, and the cost of plaster has gone up 20%. Now, all of these things individually, I don't know what the government can do about, with the possible exception of timber. I mean, the lack of the grant of felling licences in Ireland is inexplicable when you have the Department of Housing being warned that because of these costs in materials, not just timber, of course, we don't produce steel in this country, but that, you know, the lack of felling licences is explicable. But on a broader issue, Minister, what will be done? Because it seems clear now that we're in a period of inflation. 3.79%, I think, currently. In September is the estimate in Ireland. We're looking at 3% in Germany. The FT, was it yesterday, announced that the Fed were to taper their stimulus programmes. Now, it's been a long time since monetary policy for Ireland was set by the Minister for Finance. I accept that. And when it was set, it was for a very short period, given the peg to sterling, and that short period isn't really a glowing reference. But you are also the chair of the Eurozone finance ministers. So is inflation a concern of yours? Is inflation a concern of your colleagues? What do you think will be done about it? Because obviously monetary policy is the response. You don't control it. It's controlled by the central bank, of course. Philip Lane is the chief economist there, and the head of the central bank isn't an economist. So that, you know, I'm not suggesting that monetary policy will be set for Ireland and the periphery. It will clearly be set for Germany. But inflation is a concern everywhere. Would you accept that? Do you expect to see counter-inflationary measures? And what would you like to see done about it? Because ordinary people can't bear the rising costs.
Thank you, Deputy McNamara, for raising this issue. This is an issue that myself and Minister McGrath acknowledged on our Budget Day contributions. We acknowledged that we have, particularly across the summer period, seen a steady increase in the inflationary and cost of living pressures that many are facing. And the government is well aware of the additional challenge and additional cost that this is adding to families, to businesses and to workers all over our country. We absolutely appreciate that as we're trying to put this awful disease behind us, as we're trying to heal our economy and lead our economy to recovery, for this additional burden of rising costs to be faced by many is indeed an additional and a real challenge that we have to acknowledge and respond to. On a European level and indeed on a global level, there are many catalysts for this change that are beyond, as Deputy McNamara did acknowledge, are beyond the influence and control of a small open economy like Ireland, and even economies far bigger than us, as you acknowledged. Changes that are happening in energy markets, changes that have happened in global supply chains. These are things that the biggest of countries are now having to confront. And you asked me the question regarding what other colleagues across Europe feel like this and what their judgment is of it. It is, as I indicated on Budget Day, which is we are seeing the inflation levels that we have begin to increase. We said that there is a risk that they will increase further beyond the forecast that we had on Budget Day. But in terms of what we can do about it, at an economic level across the Eurozone, the President of the Central Bank of Europe has already said that she will be taking care regarding changes in monetary policy, because we're still in a situation where the economic costs of the pandemic are so real. We're still in a situation that we have to nurture so many employers back to a position that they're able to provide sustainable employment. And that is a key consideration in the choices that they are making. So it leads into what we can do here in Ireland. And what we are doing here in Ireland is the very practical changes that Minister Humphreys made in relation to the fuel allowance, the changes that took place on the 27th of September, the increase that we made in that fuel allowance, and also the changes that have been made in the income threshold, which have been increased and will be increased by €20 in January of next year. It's also the reason why the government brought forward a personal tax package, because we believe that particularly for those who are in low and middle income should receive additional support in coping with the cost of living. Now, the government appears to be the only people in this House that believe that targeted changes in personal tax have a role to play in helping people with the cost of living. But that, combined with what we've done on social welfare, is what we are doing to respond back to the challenge that Deputy McNamara correctly identified.
With respect, Minister, and I think you'll agree that the relatively minor changes to social welfare will be eaten up very quickly by the inflationary pressures in the energy market in particular, and beyond that in food prices, in building costs, etc. Because, people can't afford to heat their homes, they can't afford to carry out the building that would make it cheaper to heat their homes. But I asked you what you'd like to see, Minister, and I haven't heard that. Because, I can read a commentary in The Economist on what Christine Lagarde is doing, but I'd like to think that we're more than just bystanders reading the Financial Times, reading The Economist, that we have some input as a nation, either at the Eurozone table or more broadly into our monetary policy, that we're not just drifting along. So as the Minister for Finance of a sovereign state, what do you want to see done with monetary policy in Europe in response to this? Because only that's really going to have an impact in inflation and inflationary measures in the long term. Are we entering a period of quantitative tightening? What impact will that have on your borrowing abilities?
Minister to respond.
So in any comments that I make publicly, particularly in the work that I do within the Eurozone, I have to be conscious and respect the independence that the European Central Bank has on these matters. And I have to recognise that for decisions that they make that are very significant for all of the economies in Europe, they are independent, and they have to make those decisions independent of public and political influence. In terms of more broadly what I want to see is budgetary policy and monetary policy continuing to operate in an integrated way, and in recognition of the fact that the financial market environment within which Ireland borrows could change. This is the reason why Ireland is committed over time to steadily reducing the amount of money that we need to borrow, and to getting ourselves in a position for next year, a year ahead of schedule, where the only borrowing needs that we will have will be to fund to invest in our future. Because I do believe that we will see over time, and I hope at the right time, changes in how countries such as Ireland need to fund themselves.
Thank you, Minister.
Michael McNamara raising for a second time in Leaders' Questions, Sandra, the cost of living crisis was how Sinn Féin termed it yesterday.
Yes, Michael McNamara pointing to inflation in energy prices, in people's fuel bills, in housing and building materials, all that type of thing, and asking what the government was doing, and also what Paschal Donohoe was doing, I suppose, in his role of president of the Eurogroup. Now, Paschal Donohoe, I think, dropped a hint that we know normally that central banks, if they want to tackle inflation, they raise interest rates. He suggested that it was unlikely at the moment that the ECB would raise the interest rates, because he said they were very mindful of the fact that economies across Europe are very much still recovering, and that businesses need support at this time. And he pointed, I suppose, to what the government had done in the budget, that the government had raised the fuel allowance and raised the thresholds. So he said they were very mindful of the increases in the cost of living. But I think this is something that we're just going to hear so much about over the next couple of months.
Okay, Sandra Hurley, thank you.